Hi, welcome to AP Daily for Computer Science Principles, Topic 3.7, Nested Conditionals, Video 1. My name is Bradley Bearden, and I teach at Dadeville High School in Dadeville, Alabama. And I want to encourage you to invite a friend to take computer science. So, what will we learn today? Well, we'll look at nested selection, but in particular, we're going to look at nested conditional statements, which are conditional statements within conditional statements. So they're nested one inside the other. So here's an example of what that might look like in flowchart form, where one condition being true leads to testing a second condition. So a condition within a condition. And here's what that might look like in pseudocode text form. You'll notice an if-else block nested within the else. And then here, if-else blocks nested in the block. So let's take a look at an example and put this to practice. It may seem like a difficult concept, but if you take your time and really look at it, you can do a good job with this. So in this example, our variables are initialized to 4.5, 1200, and 5, and we want to know what will happen as a result of completing this algorithm. So the very first question we'll ask is, if time is less, we're going to try to figure out, is time less than 3 and score greater than 1,000? So if you look, since time is 4.5, that will evaluate to false. And if you recall, in an if else, if the first condition evaluates to false, you'll skip what's in the if. So now we're going to move to the else. And if you look, since 4.5 is not less than 3, but the score of 1200 is greater than 1,000. So that evaluates to true. So even though both of them aren't true, it's an or. So that condition evaluates to true, which means that this is the line that will execute. However, before we do that, I want to point out, because that line is the one we'll execute, and because that was true, we must skip the else. So the only line that we'll execute is lives plus 1 needs to be assigned to lives. So since the current lives are 5, lives will now be updated to 6. So see, that wasn't so bad. Let's try again with some different values initialized for these same variables. This time is 3, score is 1,000, and lives are 5. So just as before, we'll look at that first condition, and that evaluates to false. Even though time is 3 and score is 1,000, notice it says less than 3, not less than or equal to 3. It says greater than 1,000, not greater than or equal to 1,000. So even though the numbers are the same, these evaluate to false. So we skip and move to the next condition. Is time less than 3 or score greater than 1,000? And again, even though they match, neither of them are less than or greater than, so it still evaluates to false. So that means that we must then execute that last line. So lives will now update to be 4. So now let's take a chance and practice, or let's practice looking at a different pseudocode starter. And what I want you to do is pause your video, review the problem, and see if you can figure out what the cost of the ice cream will be for these values over here. All right, how'd you do? Let's take a look and see what happens when the Boolean variable is waffle cone is true and the Boolean variable includes toppings is false. So notice that right at the start of the code, we can go ahead and figure out that cost is initially $4.50. So let's look at the conditions and see what happens. So the first condition is waffle cone is true. And as a reminder, that means we'll skip the part at the bottom. We'll skip the else, and we're only going to consider what's in the if. But there's a nested condition in there. So we now have to test that condition. And includes toppings was false. So just like with a regular if else, we'll skip the top and we'll move to the else. And that is the line that we'll execute. So the cost was $4.50. Now the cost is $5.50. Changed the variables up slightly. So I want you to pause your video again. And I want you to see what happens and see if you can figure out the cost for these variables. How'd you do? Well, just like before, the cost was still $4.50 at the beginning, but this time waffle cone evaluates to false. So we skip that entire part and we're going to move to the else. But this time it also evaluates to be false. So in this particular example, nothing in the conditionals are executed. Therefore, the cost never changes. And so the cost of purchasing 3 scoops of ice cream on a regular cone with no toppings is still $4.50. So what should we take away? For nested selection, we should be able to look at pseudocode and determine the result of nested conditional statements. And remember that a nested conditional is a conditional inside of a conditional. Thank you.